Most people today talk about knowing God, but the truth is, they've never actually seen Him. They have seen a cultural Jesus, a powerless Christianity, a faith without fire. But when a man truly sees the Lord, everything changes. Tonight, I want to confront you with this reality. Have you truly seen Him? Or have you only sung about Him? When a man truly beholds the Lord, it is not a gentle experience. It is not a comforting vision of clouds and warmth. It is the undoing of everything he thought about himself and everything he assumed about the world. Isaiah says, in the year King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up. That moment is more than history, it is revelation. A king had died, but the King of Kings was still reigning. Isaiah was brought face to face with the absolute reality of God's sovereignty. This is where everything begins. You cannot know God until you know Him as He truly is, exalted, holy, seated on His throne, and governing all creation. And when that sight strikes the heart, it does not lift a man up in pride. It casts him down in trembling awe. The illusions that sustain us in daily life are fragile. We think we are strong. We think we are moral. We think we are good. We build reputations, ministries, families, careers, all upon the shaky ground of self. But when a man sees the Lord as He is, the foundation of self crumbles instantly. Isaiah was a prophet, already proclaiming truth to the people. Yet when he saw the Lord, his lips that once declared judgment over others now confessed his own ruin. Because standing before the blazing purity of God, no man can survive with his pride intact. The vision shattered Isaiah's confidence. And that is the necessary breaking every soul must undergo if it is to be remade in the image of Christ. We live in a day where people want God as an accessory, as a comfort, as a spiritual bandage. They want just enough religion to soothe the conscience, but not enough to slay the ego. But the God who reveals Himself in Scripture is not manageable. He is not domesticated. He is holy, holy, holy. His throne is high and lifted up, and the train of His robe fills the temple. That means His majesty floods every corner, His glory consumes every space, His authority leaves no room for rivals. When you truly see Him, you cannot stand comfortably in your own strength. You are undone. Isaiah's vision tells us something terrifying about the human condition. If the most righteous prophet in the land fell apart before God's holiness, what will happen to the average man who has lived in rebellion all his life? We deceive ourselves with comparisons. We look at others and say, I am not as wicked as them. But before God there is no comparison. The standard is His perfection, His righteousness, His eternal purity. And when His throne room opens before you, when the sound of seraphim shaking the thresholds of heaven fills your ears, you will not boast in your deeds. You will collapse in despair unless the grace of God sustains you. That is what Isaiah discovered. To see the Lord is to see reality as it truly is. Reality is not defined by human opinions, political systems, or cultural trends. Reality is the throne of God and the holiness of His presence. And reality exposes us. You may hide behind a mask in front of men, but there are no masks before Him. You may keep secret sins, but there are no secrets in His presence. Every thought, every motive, every whisper of the heart is laid bare when the throne is revealed. That is why men resist such a vision. They do not want to be undone. They do not want to see themselves as God sees them. They would rather live in illusions of self-righteousness than be stripped naked by the glory of the Almighty. Yet the very act of shattering is mercy. Isaiah's undoing was not his destruction, it was his salvation. For the man who never sees the Lord as He is, who never trembles before His throne, who never feels the weight of being undone, that man may continue in self-deception until he dies and awakens to eternal judgment. But the one who is shattered now has hope, because only the broken can be mended. Only the undone can be remade. Only the man who confesses, woe is me, will hear the cleansing word of forgiveness. Do you understand why this is so urgent? Because you can sing songs about seeing the Lord, you can repeat words and melodies, and still never encounter the reality they describe. You can have Christian language on your lips, but idols in your heart. You can attend worship and raise your hands while your life remains untouched by His glory. To truly see Him is to have the eyes of the soul opened, and when that happens, you will never again be satisfied with shallow religion. You will hunger for righteousness. You will thirst for holiness. You will cry out for mercy because you have seen the King. The tragedy of our generation is not ignorance of God's name, but ignorance of his nature. People speak of God as if he were their equal, as if he were a distant friend they can call when needed. But Isaiah did not see a manageable friend. He saw a throne. He saw seraphim covering their faces and feet, declaring without pause, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." If creatures who have never sinned cover themselves in his presence, what do you think a sinful man will do? He will collapse. He will weep. He will confess that he has no standing apart from mercy. And that is why a vision of the Lord shatters every illusion. It removes the illusion that we are good enough. It destroys the illusion that our works will save us. It obliterates the illusion that this world is about us. When you see him, you realize life is about his glory, his reign, his holiness, his majesty. You realize your breath is borrowed, your life is fragile, your destiny rests entirely in his hands. And when you see that, you stop playing games with sin. You stop treating eternity as a suggestion. You begin to live with a holy seriousness because you have glimpsed reality. The most terrifying thought is not that God does not exist, but that he does, and he is holy. If you ever see him as Isaiah did, you will know that instantly, and it will tear away your pride. It will silence your boasting. It will force you to confess your need. The vision that shatters every illusion is not meant to crush you beyond repair. It is meant to bring you to the end of yourself so you can finally rest in him. But first, you must be undone. When Isaiah beheld the Lord high and lifted up, the immediate response was not celebration but terror. He did not shout with joy. He did not dance in excitement. He fell apart. He cried, "Woe is me, for I am undone." That moment reveals something we would rather avoid. The holiness of God does not first comfort, it convicts. It does not flatter the human heart, it exposes it. In a single instant, Isaiah realized that every word that had ever left his lips, every thought that had ever crossed his mind, every desire that had ever risen in his soul stood exposed before a God of blazing purity. Holiness does not permit shadows to remain. Holiness floods every corner with light until there is nowhere left to hide. This is why modern Christianity so often feels empty. People want a God who makes them feel better about themselves, not a God who reveals who they really are. But when the real God shows himself, when the throne of heaven is unveiled, you cannot continue to live in the illusion of your own goodness. The seraphim themselves cry day and night, "Holy, holy, holy." They are without sin, yet they cover their faces in his presence. How much more must a sinful man tremble? The problem is that many have never truly encountered the holiness of God. They may have heard the word, but they have not felt the weight of it pressing on their conscience, cutting to the marrow, stripping them bare. Without that encounter, religion remains superficial and life remains unchanged. Holiness is not merely moral purity, it is the absolute otherness of God. He is separate, he is transcendent, he is unlike anything in creation. To stand before him is to realize instantly that you are not the measure of anything. Your standard of right and wrong collapses. Your attempts at comparison with others dissolve. All that remains is the piercing light of God's purity that searches every part of you. Isaiah saw this, and his response was not to defend himself or excuse his sins, but to pronounce judgment on himself. He said, "Woe is me." That is a prophetic declaration of doom. The prophet who once pronounced judgment on nations now condemns his own soul because the holiness of God has made him see the truth. When was the last time you trembled before God's holiness? When was the last time you felt undone, ruined, desperate? We talk about grace, but without a revelation of holiness, grace becomes cheap. We talk about forgiveness, but without an understanding of what we are forgiven from, forgiveness becomes sentimental. It is holiness that makes grace precious. It is holiness that makes forgiveness shocking. To realize that the God before whom angels veil themselves has chosen to look upon sinners with mercy. This is what makes the gospel staggering. But you cannot grasp the gospel until you first grasp holiness. Look at the way Isaiah responds. He does not simply say, "I have sinned." He cries out about the uncleanness of his lips. He recognizes that even the very instrument of his prophetic calling is polluted. The mouth that was supposed to carry God's words is stained with corruption, and he recognizes that he dwells among a people of unclean lips. The holiness of God not only reveals the corruption of the individual, it exposes the corruption of the community. No one stands righteous when measured against the throne. The revelation of holiness sweeps away the illusions, not just of one man, but of entire nations. It reveals that everyone has fallen short, everyone is guilty, everyone stands condemned. This is precisely why the modern church often avoids the theme of holiness. We prefer to speak of God as love without defining what his love means in light of his holiness. We prefer to speak of blessings without confronting the reality of sin. But the God of Scripture is not a sentimental deity who overlooks transgression. He is the holy king whose eyes are too pure to look upon evil. When Isaiah saw him, he did not feel affirmed, he felt destroyed. That is the true response of a man encountering holiness. It is not arrogance, it is not self-assurance, it is collapse. The holiness of God is the great leveler of humanity. The rich, the poor, the powerful, the weak, the religious, the secular, all collapse alike before his throne. Holiness strips away every title, every achievement, every mask. You cannot stand on your family's faith. You cannot stand on your own morality. You cannot stand on your religious activity. Holiness confronts the heart itself and exposes its corruption. When the spotlight of his purity shines, what is hidden in darkness is revealed for what it truly is. This is why Isaiah did not need anyone to accuse him. The holiness of God was enough to bring the accusation from his own lips. And yet, holiness is not only a terror, it is also the key to life. Because when you see God's holiness, you finally see yourself clearly. As long as you measure yourself by other men, you will always find reasons to justify yourself. But when you measure yourself by God, you will know your true condition. And that knowledge, though painful, is the beginning of salvation. Isaiah could not have been cleansed if he had not first been broken. He could not have been commissioned if he had not first been undone. Holiness is the scalpel that cuts deep so that healing can be real. Without it, you remain diseased but unaware, blind to your condition, blind to your need. It is no accident that the vision of God's holiness came at a time of national crisis. King Uzziah had died, and Isaiah's world was shaken. It was then that the Lord revealed himself in glory. Perhaps God strips away the securities of life so that we might finally see him. Perhaps he allows thrones of men to crumble so that we might fix our eyes on the throne that cannot be moved. In that moment of revelation, Isaiah was not told about political strategies, social reforms, or cultural fixes. He was shown the holiness of God, because that is what the people most desperately needed. More than comfort, more than reassurance, they needed to know who God is. And once Isaiah saw him, he could never again look at sin the same way. So it is with us. When you see the holiness of God, you will not laugh at sin. You will not excuse it. You will not toy with it. You will not measure your life by the shallow standards of culture. You will know that sin is an abomination in the sight of the Lord, that even the smallest defilement is unbearable in his presence. This is why the cross becomes the most precious reality for the one who has seen holiness. Because only there does the holy God deal with sin in a way that satisfies his justice while extending mercy. Only there does the burning purity of God meet the brokenness of man and provide cleansing. But until you know his holiness, you will never value his cross. Isaiah's cry, "Woe is me," is not the despair of a man who has no hope. It is the confession of a man finally seeing the truth. And truth always precedes redemption. Holiness strips us so that grace can clothe us. Holiness convicts us so that mercy can cleanse us. Holiness ruins us so that God can rebuild us. But the ruin is necessary. Without it, we remain deceived. Without it, we remain blind. Without it, we remain lost. When Isaiah cried out in despair, confessing his uncleanness, the scene shifted in a way that reveals the very heart of redemption. One of the seraphim flew to the altar, took a burning coal with tongues, and touched Isaiah's lips. That moment is not a myth or a poetic symbol alone. It is a picture of the only way a sinful man can stand before a holy God. Isaiah did not reach for the coal himself. He did not try to purify his own lips. He had no strength, no worthiness, no ability. The cleansing had to come from outside of him, from God's own provision. This is the great truth that separates biblical faith from every human religion. Religion tells you to clean yourself up, try harder, do more, climb higher. But the revelation of God shows us the opposite. You cannot cleanse yourself. You cannot remove the guilt. You cannot undo the stain. Holiness demands perfection, and only God can provide it. Notice the coal came from the altar. The altar is the place of sacrifice, the place where blood is shed, the place where atonement is made. In Isaiah's vision, that coal symbolized the purifying fire of God applied through sacrifice. In the fullness of time, that symbol would become reality at the cross of Christ. The Son of God, spotless and without blemish, became the offering. His blood, like that burning coal, cleanses and purifies. The coal touched Isaiah's lips, and the angel declared, "Your guilt is taken away, and your sin is atoned for." That is the gospel in its purest form. Your guilt, which you could not erase, is removed by an act of God's mercy. Your sin, which deserved judgment, is atoned for by a sacrifice you did not provide. This is why the cross is not an accessory to our faith. It is the center of everything. Without it, there is no cleansing, no forgiveness, no standing before the throne. Think carefully about what this means. Isaiah confessed his uncleanness, and God responded not with condemnation, but with cleansing. Yet that cleansing was not automatic, it was costly. The coal came from the altar, which means that behind the symbol lies sacrifice, blood, suffering. God's forgiveness is free to us, but it is not cheap. It cost the blood of his own Son. Too often people treat forgiveness lightly because they have never understood the weight of holiness or the price of cleansing. But when you see the holiness of God and the helplessness of man, you will treasure the coal from the altar. You will know that without it, you are ruined forever. Isaiah's lips were touched because his lips were the very instrument of his calling. God not only forgave him, he prepared him for service. The coal purified the part of him that was most defiled and most needed for his mission. In the same way, when Christ cleanses us, he does not only erase guilt, he also consecrates us. He takes the instruments of our sin, our minds, our tongues, our hands, our hearts, and he purifies them for his use. The same lips that once spoke corruption now declare the glory of God. The same hands that once served sin now serve righteousness. The cleansing of God is not abstract, it is practical. It transforms the very parts of us that were unclean and dedicates them to his service. Do you see how this changes everything? If Isaiah had tried to cleanse himself, he would have failed. If he had tried to atone for his sin by works, he would have remained guilty. But because God intervened, Isaiah stood forgiven, purified, and ready. This is the only hope for any man or woman. You can try your entire life to wash away your shame, but it will cling to you. You can make excuses, justify yourself, compare yourself to others, but guilt will remain. Only the coal from the altar, only the sacrifice of Christ, only the blood shed on Calvary can say to you, your guilt is taken away. This is why the gospel is not advice, but news. Advice tells you what you must do. News declares what has been done for you. The coal did not instruct Isaiah to try harder. It declared him cleansed. The cross does not tell you to fix yourself. It tells you that Christ has borne your sin. Religion burdens you with demands. Grace frees you with an accomplished reality. When the coal touched Isaiah's lips, he did not argue. He did not doubt. He did not say, I must add something to this. He simply received. And that is faith to receive what God has done in Christ, to rest in his cleansing, to believe his declaration more than your feelings. It is also crucial to see that the cleansing was immediate. One moment Isaiah was undone, the next he was forgiven. There was no delay, no probation period, no endless penance. The moment the coal touched his lips, the guilt was gone. That is the power of grace. In an instant, the entire record of sin can be wiped away, not because of what you have done, but because of what God has done. This is why Paul could say, there is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Now, not later. Now, because the cleansing has already been accomplished by Christ. And yet, while it is immediate, it is also permanent. When God declares a man cleansed, no accusation can overturn that verdict. When he says your guilt is taken away, Who can bring it back? When he says your sin is atoned for, who can demand more? This is the security of the gospel. The same God who convicts you with his holiness assures you with his mercy. The same fire that exposes you also purifies you. And once he has spoken, the matter is settled. This truth must sink deep into our hearts, because many live as though the coal never touched them. They carry shame long after God has cleansed them. They rehearse guilt that God has already removed. They live in fear of judgment when Christ has already borne their judgment. This is unbelief disguised as humility. True humility accepts what God has done. True faith rests in his declaration. If he says, your guilt is taken away, then you must believe it more than you believe your feelings. Consider also how this cleansing reveals the character of God. He is not only holy, he is merciful. He is not only just, he is gracious. He does not leave Isaiah in ruin, he provides atonement. This is the balance so often lost in our preaching. Some emphasize God's love without his holiness, making him a sentimental figure who tolerates sin. Others emphasize his holiness without his mercy, making him a terrifying figure without hope. But Isaiah's vision reveals both the God who is holy beyond comprehension is also merciful beyond measure. The coal from the altar proves that holiness and mercy meet in sacrifice. The cross of Christ is the ultimate fulfillment of this mystery. There, holiness is satisfied, justice is upheld, wrath is poured out, and yet mercy triumphs, grace abounds, forgiveness flows. Isaiah's cleansing was not for his sake alone. It was the preparation for his mission. A prophet cannot speak with unclean lips, but a forgiven prophet can speak with authority. In the same way, cleansing is not the end of the story for us. God does not cleanse us so that we can remain passive. He cleanses us to send us. He removes guilt so that we might serve without fear. He atones for sin so that we might proclaim his glory. Cleansing is the doorway to commission. Forgiveness is the foundation of mission. Before Isaiah could say, here am I, send me, he had to hear, your guilt is taken away. Only the forgiven can be sent. Only the cleansed can be used. And so the coal from the altar becomes the turning point of the entire vision. Isaiah moves from despair to forgiveness, from ruin to readiness, from woe to willingness. This is the pattern of every true encounter with God. Conviction by his holiness, cleansing by his sacrifice, commission by his authority. And the middle step, the cleansing, is what makes the other two bearable. Without cleansing, conviction would crush us. Without cleansing, commission would condemn us. But because God provides atonement, the sinner can become a servant. The ruined can become redeemed. The unclean can become a messenger of holiness. After the coal touched Isaiah's lips and the declaration of forgiveness was made, something remarkable happened. The voice of the Lord broke through, not in wrath, but in invitation. Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? The holy God who had just undone Isaiah with his glory, and then restored him by his mercy, now called him into service. This is the divine order, first the vision, then the cleansing, then the call. No man is fit to serve until he has seen the Lord and been purified by him. No one is sent until he has first been undone and forgiven. The commission does not come to the proud. It does not come to the self-sufficient. It comes to the one who knows he is nothing apart from the grace of God. Isaiah's response was immediate and unreserved. He did not ask for clarification. He did not negotiate terms. He did not delay with excuses. He cried, here am I, send me. That response was not born of ambition or pride, but of gratitude. The man who had been ruined by holiness and restored by grace could not remain silent. His very life had been given back to him, and now he offered it to God without hesitation. That is the mark of true conversion. It does not merely produce relief. It produces surrender. A man who has seen the Lord does not cling to his own will. He bows and says, take my life. It belongs to you. This commission is not a polite suggestion. It is the demand of divine authority. When the king calls, there is only one appropriate response. Yet notice the tenderness in the question, whom shall I send? The God of infinite power who needs no one still chooses to use men. He could send angels. He could thunder from heaven, yet he calls for human messengers. That is both a terrifying privilege and a sobering responsibility. To be called by God is to be entrusted with his word. to be his voice in a world of lies, to carry his truth into the darkness. And that call always comes with a cost. Isaiah was not sent to an eager audience ready to repent. The Lord told him in advance that the people would hear but not understand, see but not perceive. His ministry would be marked by hardness, rejection, and judgment. Yet still he said, "Here am I, send me." This teaches us something crucial about the nature of calling. It is not about success as the world defines it. It is about obedience. The measure of Isaiah's faithfulness would not be numbers, applause, or recognition. It would be his willingness to speak the words of God regardless of the response. A true calling is sustained not by visible results, but by the vision of the Lord who called you. This is why many fall away from ministry or grow cold in their service. They entered with the wrong expectation. They thought God's call was about comfort, about blessing, about personal fulfillment. But the call of God is a call to die, a call to deny yourself, a call to suffer for his glory. The same lips that had been cleansed were now to be used to declare a message that would harden hearts and bring judgment. That is not an easy assignment, yet Isaiah embraced it because he had seen the King. When you have truly seen the Lord, you do not measure the task by its difficulty, you measure it by his worth. The commission also reveals that cleansing is never an end in itself. God does not forgive a man merely to make him comfortable. He forgives him to make him useful. Grace is not a license for idleness. It is empowerment for service. Isaiah could not have stood in the presence of God's holiness apart from cleansing, but once cleansed, he could not remain idle. Forgiveness produced mission. Mercy produced obedience. Redemption produced surrender. If a man claims to be forgiven yet has no desire to serve, no willingness to go, no heart to obey, then perhaps he has never truly been touched by the coal from the altar. True forgiveness always ignites a flame of devotion. Consider the words, "Here am I." Isaiah does not present a resume. He does not list qualifications. He does not bargain for conditions. He simply offers himself. That is what God requires. He does not need your strength, your skill, your reputation. He requires your surrender. The power for the mission does not come from the messenger, but from the one who sends. All he asks is availability, a heart that says, "Take me, use me, send me wherever you will." That is the essence of discipleship, to lay your life at his feet and trust him to do what he wills with it. It is also important to see that Isaiah's willingness was not casual enthusiasm. This was not the excitement of an emotional moment. This was the sober commitment of a man who had been broken and remade. He knew the cost. He had seen the glory. He had felt the fire of cleansing. He understood that to be sent by God is to carry a message heavier than life itself. And still he said yes. That is what makes his response authentic. It was not based on personal ambition, but on the overwhelming reality of God's worth. When you have been ruined by his holiness and redeemed by his mercy, you cannot say anything else but, "Send me." The commission also reminds us that God's work in us always has an outward expression. The vision of God transforms the heart. The cleansing from God restores the soul. But the call of God sends us into the world. A vision that does not lead to mission is incomplete. Forgiveness that does not produce obedience is false. Worship that does not result in witness is empty. Isaiah's encounter with God culminated not in private comfort, but in public proclamation. The same must be true for us. If you have seen the Lord and been cleansed by him, you are called to be his witness, whether across the street or across the world. The words, "Who will go for us?" also echo something profound. The singular I and the plural us point to the mystery of the Trinity. Father, Son, and Spirit together sending, together commissioning, together working. When you answer the call of God, you are stepping into the eternal mission of the triune God. You are joining a work that stretches from eternity past to eternity future. You are not carrying your own message. You are bearing his word, empowered by his Spirit, serving his Son, glorifying his Father. That is why no calling is small, no assignment insignificant. Every act of obedience participates in the eternal mission of God. Isaiah's willingness to be sent stands as a model for every believer. The moment of cleansing is followed by the moment of surrender. The question is never whether God is calling. The question is whether you will answer. His voice still cries, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" And the only response that honors him is, "Here am I." It may mean going to a difficult place. It may mean speaking to a hardened people. It may mean suffering without recognition. But if you have truly seen the Lord, if you have truly been cleansed, you will not hesitate. You will know that the greatest privilege is not in being spared from sacrifice, but in being chosen to serve the King whose throne is high and lifted up. When a man beholds the Lord as he truly is, the shallow disguises of religion fall away, and the reality of transformation becomes unavoidable, because the presence of the Holy One does not leave anyone neutral. We live in a time where many wear the name of Christ, but remain untouched by his power, reciting prayers without trembling, singing songs without tears, speaking of grace without ever having been broken by sin. But when a man truly sees the Lord high and lifted up, something shifts at the core of his being. Isaiah could not walk away from that encounter unchanged, and neither can anyone who has truly seen him. It is not a matter of adding religious language to an unchanged heart. It is not about attending more services or clapping louder during worship. It is about being completely undone in the presence of his glory and then remade by the fire of his holiness. If a man says he has seen the Lord and yet he remains the same in thought, in speech, in appetite, in lifestyle, then he has not seen him at all, but has only encountered a shadow, an idea, or a figment shaped by culture. The mark of seeing the Lord is always transformation. Isaiah cried out that he was ruined, and the ruin became the very foundation of his new life. To be ruined by God is the most gracious act he can bestow upon a sinner. When God ruins you, he tears down the old structures of pride, of self-dependence, of hidden sin. He dismantles the walls you have built around your heart, the masks you wear in front of men, the false assurances you cling to when conscience whispers against you. And then once you are stripped of all defense, he builds you anew. This is not an optional step in Christianity. It is the very evidence that grace has taken hold. To walk away from God's presence unchanged is impossible, for his holiness exposes, his mercy heals, and his call demands surrender. Consider how so many sit under sermons week after week and yet remain unmoved. They hear of the cross, but their lives are no different from those who deny it. They speak of love, but harbor bitterness. They sing of holiness, but indulge secret sins. Why? Because they have never truly seen the Lord. They have seen religion, perhaps even emotion, but not the blazing majesty of God. One glimpse of him breaks the hardest heart. One vision of his glory silences the proudest tongue. One touch from his cleansing fire leaves a man with no taste for the trivial, no appetite for the world's filth, no patience for half-hearted faith. A transformed life is the unmistakable proof that a man has seen the Lord. When Isaiah stood in that temple vision, he did not come out with a more polished version of himself. He came out with a new identity. The man who once might have spoken casually about the sins of others now confessed his own. The prophet who had words for everyone else now stood speechless before God. And when he was cleansed, he did not return to his own agenda, but surrendered to the mission of God. That is what happens when you see the Lord. You lose the right to yourself. Your plans, your ambitions, your comforts, your excuses all collapse before his throne. And the strange miracle is that in losing yourself, you finally live. You are freed from the slavery of sin and the tyranny of self-will, and you begin to walk in obedience that is not a burden but a joy. The transformation cannot be hidden, because the fire of God within a man burns through every corner of his life. His speech changes because his lips have been touched. His eyes change because he has seen glory. His hands change because they are now surrendered instruments. His steps change because he no longer walks according to the course of the world, but in the path of the one who called him. It is not that he tries harder to appear holy before men. It is that the very nature of his heart has been altered by an encounter with the living God. When someone has seen the Lord, you do not need to convince them to pray. They cry out day and night. You do not need to persuade them to forsake sin. They hate what once enslaved them. You do not need to push them to proclaim the truth. They burn to tell it, even if it costs them everything. The tragedy is that so many settle for less, mistaking religion for reality. They polish the outside while the inside remains unchanged. They are content with songs that stir the emotions but never pierce the conscience. They are satisfied with sermons that entertain but do not expose. And in all of this, they miss the very essence of Christianity, that a man once dead in sin has been made alive by the living God. The gospel is not about making you better. It is about making you new. It is not about adjusting your habits, but about crucifying your old nature and raising you in the power of Christ. When you see the Lord, you are marked forever. Do you see the contrast? A man who has never seen the Lord can live in secret compromise for years without distress. He can gossip, cheat, lie, lust, and still sleep soundly at night. He may even preach, sing, or serve, but his conscience is quiet because he has never been scorched by the presence of God. But when a man has truly seen the Lord, even the smallest sin becomes unbearable. The very thought of grieving the one who cleansed him drives him to repentance. Holiness is no longer a duty, but a delight. The world loses its charm because the eyes have beheld something greater. He cannot go back, he cannot pretend, he cannot be satisfied with shadows because he has seen the substance. The transformation is not about perfection, but about direction. Isaiah did not leave the temple flawless, but he left with a new heart and a new mission. The man who was once undone now became God's messenger. And so it is with every soul who encounters God in truth. You may stumble, but you cannot return to your old ways with comfort. You may struggle, but the Spirit within you will not let you rest in sin. You are different, not by your own willpower, but by the power of the one who touched you. The evidence of seeing the Lord is that your life declares it long after the vision fades. Your friends notice, your family notices, the world notices, because transformation is visible. A Christianity without transformation is not Christianity at all. To claim to have seen the Lord and yet remain in bondage is deception. To speak of his holiness but live in filth is hypocrisy. To sing of his grace but never experience cleansing is tragedy. When a man truly sees the Lord, he is ruined and remade, exposed and forgiven, humbled and sent. He is never the same again, and he does not want to be.